Today I'm going to be showing you how I use one of my printables on my Teachers Pay Teachers page that go along with the A School Story by Andrew Clements. So as you can see here, this is my table of contents, and I did save this page and this page to be my table of contents. How big you want this to be for you and your students depends on how many books and things you plan on putting in these. You can make it only a literary book, or you can make it an all subjects book. There's so many different ways to do an interactive notebook that it's really up to you and to how you're implementing it in your classroom. And I will have a video on my channel discussing how different ways you can set up an interactive notebook. But this is just one way that I've done my literary one, since obviously my literary interactive notebook. This is my copy. So, as you'll see, I have the school story broken into different topics based on different chapters in the book. So I cover narrator, imagery, conflict, character, and setting and theme. And so a few different ways for each of these, but these are specific to the school story. It's actually a project based on a project that I made for myself in one of my classes in working to become an elementary teacher. So the first page, I have like a cover page for any books that I do. I put the name, I put a picture of the book, and then the topics I cover in the book, and then just for my reference, I put which chapters I cover them in. So for narrator, I cover it in chapter 1. For imagery, I choose chapter 7. Conflict is chapter 8. Character is chapter 12. Setting is chapter 17. And theme is chapter 20 at the end of the book. And so typically I would read the chapter and then have the students do the activities once we've talked things through, and I've kind of showed them my expectation. So first, narrator. The beginning of the book is really interesting because the school story, the main character is actually writing a book, and so we get excerpts from her book. And that's written in a different perspective than Andrew Clements, the author, writes in. So you get two different perspectives. And so the excerpts are first person. And so you have narrator, first person, uses I, me, we, and us. So it says, I catch up with Sean between 82nd and 81st Streets. His legs are longer than mine, so I'm panting. Page 2. And then Andrew Clements writes in third person, omniscient, and so you know it's that because they use he, she, and they. And so omniscient means it has multiple character perspectives. Natalie leaned against the doorframe and chewed on her thumbnail. She thought, what's taking her so long? Zoe could see Natalie out of the corner of her eye. So you get two different characters' perspectives, so you know it's omniscient. There's multiple characters. And so this is a really great opportunity to talk through some of those differences with your students while you're reading the book. First, see if they notice any differences in reading and listening during your read aloud, and then point out through text examples like I did where the differences are and how you can tell which is first and third person. And then you can have them copy down, or you can type this up for them if you have a specific passage you want to use. But this is kind of how I laid out the page. Obviously, want to note, a glue stick is usually best to use, but white glue works as well, Elmer's glue. But it's a little less messy to use a glue stick, so if at all possible, I would suggest that. Alright. So, let's see. In reading chapter 6, it's about imagery, and so I define imagery for my students, passages that create a vivid image in the reader's mind, or in the reader's head. So I picked a passage from chapter 6. It's pages 30 through 31, and it's a textual example. And so it says, standing in the opening of Ella's cubicle, Natalie sipped on a strawberry kiwi drink and looked at the mounds of mail from writers all over the country. Brown envelopes, white envelopes, red and gold envelopes with fancy lettering, manuscripts from writers in California and Illinois and Texas and Florida, hundreds of them. Some of them had been mailed more than 6 months ago. Some of the envelopes hadn't even been opened. It was like a morgue for dead books. So you might want to go through some vocabulary here, depending on your reader's ability to comprehend all of the words in this, especially like morgue. What's a morgue? You can explain that to your readers. So something that I did in my original copy of this was I left space either here or on the next page, which obviously I have things there, where I could draw. I didn't do it in my teacher's copy because I didn't want my students to base it on what I drew. But basically, I would give the students this textual example, have them listen to it while you read it to them, and then I would have them draw a picture. Doesn't matter if they're great drawers or very artistic. It's just good for them to have that hands-on activity. It's not going to take that long. It shouldn't. And if it does, they can always do more at home. You can send it home with them to finish and bring it back the next day if you trust them with that. But just draw what they see from this passage. So like they could take any piece out of this. I personally just drew the desks and all the letters piled. That's what I drew. But someone else might be drawing Natalie sipping on the strawberry kiwi drink. And like have a different perspective. And so you could share that and show how the vivid image in the reader's head is going to be very different because there's no illustration of this. So it's really important for details to be included from the reader. Then conflict, which if I check here, conflict is chapter 8. So after reading chapter 8, I would go over conflict, and there's actually 2 parts to this. So conflict, the main problem that must be overcome in a story. So talk about the problems in the story. There's a few different ones you can take out. Talk through types of conflict. So character versus character, character versus self, character versus nature, character versus technology. And this you could really do with any book. I just chose this one since I was doing other literary elements anyways. And so then this is my favorite. I did what's called a tip-in, and so use tape of any color. You can use color tape, clear tape like I did, but you tape on one side and you tape on the other so it's a flap, right? So you have the external and the internal conflict, right? So external, you can see it on the outside. The internal conflict is more hidden from anybody else besides the character who's feeling it. So you can talk through that, give some other examples if you want. And so then the problem in the book is, and students can do this by themselves, you could come up with this as a class. This would be a great thing to brainstorm wherever you're at when you're reading, just like in a circle, on the carpet, wherever you're doing your read aloud, just brainstorm it right away, right after the reading. So the problem in this book is, and so I said, Natalie doesn't believe in herself. And so that's kind of the thing that she's overcoming at that point in the book. You could choose any point in the book to do this if you really wanted to. It doesn't have to be at that point. The type of conflict in this book is, and so based on this, I'd say it's character versus self. That would change depending on what your conflict is. Okay, so let me talk through characters. So you have major characters, characters who are needed to resolve conflict. Who is a major character in this book? Natalie and Zoe are my main 2. Minor characters, characters who help the main characters and help resolve the conflict in a smaller way. Who is a minor character in this book? Mrs. Clayton, or Miss Clayton, was who I picked as a minor character. You could have a longer list with characters from different chapters, but at the point in the story where I picked it, she had just come onto the scene, and so she was the minor character that I picked. So then characters continued. I really like this because you can pull this out and do this with any story. So you have the protagonist, the antagonist, the goal, and the conflict. The goal of the protagonist, obviously, and this is really good for like graphs, for teaching this kind of setup for students. I mean, like, okay, so you have to look at the goal. So you come over from here and the protagonist, goal, and the antagonist. And it'd be really good to just solidify those skills for them of taking two things and putting it in a box, two different things and putting it in a box. So kind of a science-y almost concept. So you're getting some different things in here. But the protagonist, it's the event, object, etc. the protagonist must achieve or all will be lost. Then the conflict from the protagonist, the actions the antagonist takes to achieve his goals that block the protagonist from achieving her goals. The antagonist's goal, the event, object, etc. the antagonist must achieve or all will be lost, according to them. So it's the same thing, but slightly different. And obviously these are usually against themselves, or against each other. And same here. But it's kind of cool to be able to have the kids write this in and not just copy and paste it. It's them thinking about it, you all talking through it. You could write this on the board for them and make this, and then have them fill it out, have them come up and write it, however you want to do it. So then setting, the backdrop of a story, place, time. You can add so much more detail than this. I said school in early 2000s. So, you know, add as much detail as you want, but this would be like a really quick one to do at any point in the book as well. And then my favorite. So the theme, I would definitely save this until the end of the book. But this is another one that you can do later on in the story. Or, sorry, you can do it with multiple stories later on in the book. So theme, it's the heart of the story. Evidence, 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 evidence. And then the heart is where you put the theme. So I said the theme of the story was friendship. There are so many themes that you could pick for this book. Do not feel limited by what I have here. This is just an idea. But friendship was what I picked. And so I picked quotes from the book. I note the page number and I put it in here. So you could, if you had like a class set for this book, you could have them all go and look for textual examples of what they think the theme is. And I think this would be a really great project to do with any book. But it would be like 20-minute activity if you wanted it to be. It could be less than that, depending on your class and how self-motivated they might be. But you can also pick out evidence and put it on a sheet and be like, okay, pick from this sheet, here's all the text, what do you think the theme is? And so that can be leading or that can be open, however you want to do it. But I thought it was friendship, and then at the bottom I just put this because it kind of solidified everything. Natalie blushed. I know that's what the contract says, but really, Zoe, you should get a lot more than that. I mean, without you, the story would just be sitting in a pile at my house. And so through that, I felt like that wrapped all of this together well. But the main thing is to prove, or to emphasize to your students that the theme is backed up throughout the story with textual evidence. You don't just pull it out of thin air. You find it and you have like around four, depending on how long the book is. But like for a chapter book, 4 is pretty easy, especially with how much is in that book, in the school story. But I hope that this video was helpful for you. Please check out my Teachers Pay Teachers story for these printables. They'll be going up shortly before this video is published. And stay tuned for more content from me. Whenever I have a new printable, my goal is to do this with you so you can see how I'm implementing it in this kind of notebook, the interactive notebook, since I firmly believe in an interactive notebook in the classroom. I think it's a very valuable tool to be used with any grade, but especially those elementary kids. So, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.